Nubia is very important concerning the antiquity of African civilization and its contributions to the more recognized Egyptian civilization. Contrary to popular belief, the first recognized civilization in the Nile Valley was not Egyptian but Nubian. Thus, wouldn't it only be natural that Nubian rulers would have held some sway over Egyptian civilization before the 25th dynasty? Today, we'll explore that answer. What up, African world? It's Home Team here, and welcome back to another video of African history, culture, and worldview. By supporting this channel on Patreon, you're helping in the creation of these videos and supporting this content. If you'd like access to full courses and sources, or you simply want to show your support, you may do so by clicking the Patreon link in the description box below. Some of the earliest sources outside of Africa, primarily Greek sources, point to the antiquity of Nubian people and civilization. Initially, many Greek scholars actually traveled to Egypt to learn from a civilization they deemed older than theirs. Upon their arrival, to their surprise, they would learn that there existed on the African continent an even older civilization. This civilization or people would be known as the Ethiopians to the Greeks, what we would call Nubians or the people of the Sudan today. The two primary Greek historians that seem to be more open to this idea and more vocal about what they were told in Egypt were Herodotus and Theodorus Siculus. Interestingly enough, Theodorus Siculus, upon his visit to Egypt, spoke with a local who attributes most of Egypt's civilization to the Nubian people. Theodorus told us what he heard while he was there. They say that the Egyptians are colonists sent out by the Nubians, Osiris having been the leader of the colony, and the larger part of the customs of the Egyptians are they hold Nubian, the colonists still preserving their ancient manners. For instance, the belief that their kings are gods, the very special attention which they pay to their burials, and many other matters of a similar nature are Nubian practices. Many other things are also told by them concerning their own antiquity and the colony which they sent out that became the Egyptians. So from the very beginning, it would seem as though, at least from early Nile Valley accounts, based on what Theodorus was told, Egypt was a colony of Nubian migrants who began bringing their culture to that part of the Nile. This would seem to align with the idea that the Nubian kingdom of Tasseti, the Nile Valley's first recognizable civilization, later became an Egyptian city after the first ruler Menes conquered the region. Based on what Theodorus is telling us, the Nubians, who first came down the Nile to go into Egypt, over time became the Egyptians. This is not to say at all that the Egyptians are Nubians, as many Africans across the continent migrated into Egypt, but it does suggest that the foundation of Egyptian culture and civilization are Nubian, according to ancient oral and written tradition. What's even more telling is the invention of the so-called Egyptian hieroglyphs that is claimed to be of Nubian origin by Theodorus. As mentioned in a previous video, the very hieroglyphic symbol for a human face no doubt resembles a typical Nubian or Sudanese man who would have existed during that time. Theodorus tells us the shapes of their statues and the forms of their letters are Nubian, for of the two kinds of writing which the Egyptians have, that which is known as popular is learned by everyone, while that which is called sacred is understood only by the priests of the Egyptians who learn it from their fathers as one of the things which are not divulged. But among the Nubians, everyone uses these forms of letters. We must now speak about the Nubian writing, which is called hieroglyphic among the Egyptians, in order that we may omit nothing in our discussion of their antiquities. As Theodorus continues with his talking points, he drops a gem. He himself calls hieroglyphics a Nubian writing form and alludes to the idea that it was invented by them. Now, of course, this perspective is in stark contrast to what we in the Western world accept, but in actuality, this account does fall precisely in line with ancient oral and written tradition. If Nubia was indeed the first civilization on the Nile, and oral history maintains that Egypt used to be a colony of Nubian migrants or perhaps conquerors, Then we should also expect to see some rulers in early Egyptian history who were of Nubian extraction. Interestingly enough, this is exactly what we see in Old Kingdom Egypt, at least from an account from another Greek historian named Herodotus. Herodotus claims that an Egyptian priest told him the following. The priest said that Mena was the first king of Egypt. Next, they read me from a papyrus the names of 330 monarchs who they said were his successors upon the throne. In this number of generations, there were 18 Nubian kings and 1 queen who was a native. All the rest were kings and Egyptians. We've come a very long way from the ancient Greek historical perspective, which all seems to tell us the same story, that Nubia is not only older than Egypt, but is the foundation from which Egyptian culture took off. Traditionally, we accept the fact that Nubian pharaohs controlled Egypt in the 25th dynasty, but rarely do we hear about this ancient perspective concerning numerous Nubian pharaohs in the Old Kingdom. From this Greek account, we can see that the religious vigor and feelings of ownership over the Nile Valley civilization proclaimed by the Kushite pharaohs makes perfect sense. It's also important to note that Theodorus and Herodotus were simply documenting the oral tradition within Africa itself, as the Egyptians or Nubians they spoke with told them this. Theodorus traveled to Egypt around 60 and 56 BC. And Herodotus is believed to have traveled as far as Upper Egypt. And so, these two Greek scholars would have immediate access to first-hand oral accounts of African history, more importantly, from an African perspective. In other words, if we are to cast doubt on the accounts of these Greek scholars, then we also have to cast doubt on the oral tradition coming out of the Nile Valley itself. It certainly would have been interesting if we got the names of these Old Kingdom Nubian pharaohs. Unfortunately today, we can only speculate. Well, I'm all out, guys. If you like these videos and want to help in its continued production, consider supporting the home team on patreon.com. The link is in the description box below. Know thyself, remember your ancestors. Peace.